Thank you so much for coming. 2 minutes until we get started. Good morning. I'm Zuva Goverwa. I was the 2021 PISA State Champion and went on to compete in the national final. I've also been an adjudicator throughout this year's competition. I'll be your MC for the Plain English Speaking Award State Final for 2023. To welcome us to country, I'd like to invite Wurundjeri Elder Tony Garvey to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of my people, the Wurrung people from Corranderk out at Hillsville, which I have fought for land rights for the last 35 years and will continue to do so on this lands. My great-grandfather was the last Nurrungita. Nurrungita in Wurundjeri language means the last head tribesman living on the land on the mission at Corranderk out at Hillsville. He took over from our fearless leader, which was King Barrack. King Barrack was my great uncle. He took on the government in the mid-1800s right up till 1906 when he passed for land rights and obviously did no good. My great-grandfather after that took over from 1906 and led our mob till 1926 when the mission was closed due to colonisation and forced out into white society. The Wurundjeri people, they are also a part of the Kulin Nation. So Kulin means man. In the Kulin Nation we had the 5 language groups. We had the Wadawurrung to the west, the Coorong, who were the westerly neighbours to the Wadawurrung, Tanarong to the northeast, Bunurong to the southwest, and the Wurrung of the Wurundjeri territory that we stand on here today. The Wurundjeri lies within the cities of Melbourne, extends from the mountains of the Great Dividing Range, south of the Yarra River to the Mordialloc Creek, west to the Werribee River, and east to Mount Baw Baw. The Wurundjeri people, they have a social totem. It is Bunjil the Eagle. Bunjil represents spiritual powers throughout many parts of Australia. Bunjil taught all the laws about life, behaviour and ceremonies to make sure that our culture would continue for all walks of life throughout Australia. So Bunjil was referred to as the creator of mankind. Bunjil created great people from the land, and that is why we call the land our mother, or the mother of creation. Never can the land be taken away. The land will always belong to Aboriginal people, as we are part of the land and the land is part of us. Our story is similar to the European people. Theirs is by their chosen faith, ours is by the dream time. We both have creators and beliefs, and ours is Bunjil. It is a traditional custom of the Australian Aboriginal communities to be asked and to give permission for people to enter their lands. And today you have now joined with me to honour the spirits of my ancestors, past, present and merging, who have nurtured these lands for over 60,000 years. And we, as the owners of the lands, offer our heartily welcome to the lands and hope that together as citizens of this beautiful country, we can build, develop and unite stronger nations for all peoples. I'll close in the Wurrung language, which is Wimijika, Wandun, Wurundjeri, Balakim and Kumibik, which means you're most welcome to the land of the Wurundjeri people. Before I jump down and get that loud clap I am expecting, I just want to touch on the voice. I think it's important at the moment we start getting some heads around the voice. I mean, people say to me, do you understand the voice? I said, well, not really, but it'd be nice to have a foot in the door of Parliament, wouldn't it? You know, after all these years, we've been here for over 60,000 years and still got no rights to speak on our own country from invasion. Now, European people have been here for 280 years. My family have been here for over 60,000 years and still got no rights to their country. It's a total disgrace, this country, you know, and I can't say it loud enough. They're so far behind in education, deliberately behind, I must say, deliberately. And I'll explain that because we've got an office in Collingwood at the moment and we have been there for 20 years and we are still renting the premises on traditional lands 20 years later. So if that's not saying how far the government are behind in this country, I don't know what it's saying. And if it's not saying there's no racism left in the country, it's a joke too. So we plan on working together with everyone. We want to work together with everyone, but we can only do that if the government are going to stand tall and tell the truth about what actually happened to this country. Because I was brought up with the lies that everyone else was brought up with. Your Captain Cooks and your Queens and all this crap, which doesn't belong here, it comes from England. All these statues around this town here, this Melbourne, you look at them all around Parliament House. I did a welcome at Parliament House, and I said to them, geez, you've got some beautiful statues. They said, oh, don't you like them, do you? And I said, oh, yeah, they look good. I said, but none of them are from our people. I said, they're all from people that invaded the country. I said, it's got nothing to do with them. I said, this is my country, this is my people's country. If you're going to call anyone the King and Queen of Melbourne, you call the Wurundjeri Wurrung people the King and Queen of Melbourne, because we are the King and Queen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony, for welcoming us to country today. This is a pertinent moment for us all in the audience and watching online to consider the land we live and work on. I would also like to acknowledge that we are hosting today's event from Wurundjeri country and would like to pay my respects to Wurundjeri elders past, present, as well as community leaders and any First Nations people joining us today. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from 6 remarkable students who have made it to the PISA State Final. They have already distinguished themselves by making it this far, impressing our adjudicators at the state heats and in the semi-finals. Taking a complex subject and communicating clearly without jargon and ambiguity is a skill that can be usefully applied in all areas of life. As a past state finalist and adjudicator for the Plain English Speaking Award, I know how much work goes into making language simple and direct. And I congratulate our speakers on this hard work and making it to the state final. It is now my pleasure to welcome the CEO of the VCAA, Stephen Ganil, to say a few words.
Well, thanks, Zuva. And I don't think it's been any clearer to me about the importance of plain English speaking than what we just heard from our elder. So for those people in the front row, there's lots of follow-up there for us as well. And it's not lost on me that I'm following up straight after Tony and his very heartfelt message. And unfortunately, I think he's gone, but we'll make sure that we do pay that respect to Tony and acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we're on this morning. And I do that collectively for all of us in the audience, and also acknowledge that there's people online that are on different parts of our country and traditional owners of those lands. So, first of all, I'd just like to welcome our colleagues from Catholic Education, Independent Schools Victoria and the Department of Education who are joining us today. I'd also like to just shout out to our friends from the Australian Britain Society who've generously supported the Plain English Speaking Awards for many years. And Miranda was talking about, I think, is it 1977, did you say, Miranda? I mean, it's a pretty remarkable achievement. We're close on 50 years of this competition, and we've got one of our former winners here in front of us, Zuva. It's wonderful to have you back and adjudicating as well. It just does signal just how important these type of awards, but more importantly, events and celebrations of public speaking for all of us. So I'd also like to extend a warm welcome, of course, to our 6 finalists. Congratulations. Their families, their dedicated teachers, and their supporters here today. And I know we've got at least one principal here today, very proud. Also, I really want to welcome all of those school groups who are here, friends and family, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come along to this outstanding event, and I think we're all in for a bit of a treat. So, on behalf of the VCAA, I call it the VCAA. Apparently in other places it's called VCAR. Is that right? Yeah, I like VCAA better, so I call it VCAA, but whenever I'm in schools, it's always referred to as VCAR. So welcome to all of you. The VCAA are really delighted to be partnering again with the Wheeler Centre this year to present the PISA State Finals, and what a wonderful place that we have to hear from each of you today. The Wheeler Centre is a hub for discussion, debate, writing and ideas. And I'd really encourage everyone to take advantage of the many programs that they facilitate, including panel talks, education resources and podcasts, of course. We're very pleased to be able to live stream today these state finals via the Wheeler Centre website, and thank you for that. And really, again, want to welcome everyone who's online with us today. This year we have 6 inspiring, talented students who will shortly be taking to the stage to share their passions, insights and visions for the future. You should be extremely proud of yourselves for being here today. Of the 16 state heats and 4 semi-finals, you guys have nabbed the top spots from over 150 of your peers. And in fact, if you think about how many students there are going to school every day, to get to this peak point is a pretty amazing achievement, so congratulations. We're really pleased that so many people chose to participate in the state heats, and they took place across 2 weeks in May. All the speakers here today have been successfully expressing themselves in front of an audience, something that does not come easily to many of us, and lots of us have to work really hard at that. So to be at your age and being so confident to be up in front of people is a really great skill to have. It's only by practice that students can achieve a high level of oral communication, and that's why the VCAA is so proud to coordinate this public speaking award, which encourages students to investigate topics that they're passionate about, to tell stories and to gain confidence in speaking fearlessly. And again, I think we saw some of that from Tony. And I think I might be trying to find a different page here. Here we go. I'm sure none of you will have that problem when you're up here. What we encourage through this award is the ability to express yourself clearly and succinctly. And of course, our curriculum supports the aims of the award through VCE English and VCE Vocational Major, the new certificate for our state, where students are required to develop strategies for constructing a sustained, coherent and logical argument, either orally or in writing. Communication, of course, features strongly in our Foundation to Year 10 curriculum, and I would add also in our early childhood learning and development frameworks. It's something that we need from a very early age. And of course, through the research and investigation required to write a persuasive and engaging speech, students develop their ethical, creative and critical thinking. Finally, I'd like to thank the PISA adjudicators, those who participated throughout the competition and those with us today. Without you, the state final would not have been possible, of course. I look forward to a fierce competition this morning from our finalists and to hearing each of you from both your prepared and your impromptu speeches. I really wish you all the best of luck this morning, so thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Now it's time to meet 3 people with a tough job ahead of them, our adjudicators. Beck Kavanagh is our head adjudicator today. Beck is a Melbourne-based writer and academic. She has judged many literary prizes, including the Victoria Premier's Literary Award, and was the school manager for the Stella Prize for 5 years. She is currently the school programmer at the Wheeler Centre, as well as a sessional tutor and academic at La Trobe University. Travis Lyons was the PISA State Champion in 2012 and has been an adjudicator ever since. He completed a combined Doctor of Medicine and Master of Public Health at the University of Melbourne in 2020. Travis is currently a junior doctor in Mildura. Tierney Khan was the 2020 PISA State Champion, winning with a speech titled Not Another Speech About Feminism, which focused on the pervasiveness of sexual violence and the necessity for a reinvigoration of feminism. Since then, she has become a frequent guest programmer and host for events at the Wheeler Centre, written several articles for the blog Rosie, and commenced a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Melbourne. Okay, so how is today going to run? We have 6 student speakers. One by one, they will present their 8-minute prepared speech. At the 7-minute mark, they will ring the bell once, which will sound like this. At the 8-minute mark, the bell will ring twice, which will sound like this. The adjudicators will need some time between each speaker to finalize their notes. While that happens, Rani Tuan will keep us entertained with some music. Rani performed as a top-class music and top act during the Season of Excellence in 2023. He is now studying music at the Box Hill Institute. A brief content warning. Corbyn would like you to know that he will be mentioning eating disorders and suicide in his speech. He is speaking third. You are welcome to exit the space and return after Corbyn's speech if you would prefer to avoid these themes today. On a similar note, if you need to exit the room at any point, please wait until the speaker has finished speaking before exiting and re-entering the room. We ask that you do not take any photos during the speeches, as this can be distracting for our speakers. You'll have time to take photos after the speeches. Finally, please take a moment to silence your phones, including turning off vibrate. After the prepared speeches, our 6 finalists will present an impromptu speech, but more on that later. Now, let's get going with our first speaker. Please welcome Anne-Mary Chalakal from Loreto College, Ballarat on Wurrung country with a speech called A Voice for the Voiceless.
Taliban forbid women from universities. This is the headline that dominates your screens, and it kicks in. It starts in your gut before it simmers and bubbles and the sheer injustice overwhelms you, and you desperately want to speak out and be the much-needed voice for the voiceless. The call for justice is straightforward. People are suffering, they need help, and here you are in a privileged position. You have the opportunity to be a voice that shines light on the dire state of the world. It's commendable, noble even, until you realize that your passionate outbursts overpowers the quiet but ever-present voice in the corner that speaks, "I deserve my education." As the media exposes the conditions of marginalized communities, far too often the reactions of those existing beyond them have been the focus. Take the example of the ongoing crisis for women within Afghanistan. In late December last year, the Taliban issued a statement banning all Afghan women from universities. But amongst the ruckus of international uproar from politicians to social media enthusiasts, the sounds of heartbreak endured by over 2 million young girls faded to mere noises in the background. Following the statement, countless articles surfaced from women in an outcry, some even reporting to The Guardian, "I felt like I was dead." But these intimate and personal revelations weren't the headliners, rather the frenzy of fury from those removed from the situation. And this is no new phenomenon. An ANU research reported that the Black Lives Matter movement saw over 118 million tweets in 2020 and 2021. The initial movements were led by black activists demanding structural change. It was massive, but unfortunately, with its size, the core messages promoted by those most dearly affected subsided into the background. What was deemed the hallmark of activism suddenly became hashtags and merchandise material, diluting the global grassroots movement into yet another trend. This is the fate that plagues so many of the so-called voiceless of our society as they attempt to break through their concerns. But why do I speak on this? Because on almost every level, we see the struggle between genuinely well-meaning individuals and groups wishing to speak out on those whom we deem are unable, all without considering the consequences of our actions. Now, I continue this speech with a level of hypocrisy, as I implore you to consider the consequences of being a voice for the voiceless. I momentarily assume that role in speaking out on matters that should concern all of us, even if I'm not directly affected by it. But what we must learn is that we each occupy spaces, and our own experiences should pave the foundation for a mutual sense of empathy. As a young brown woman, I fear for the future, knowing I'll fight glass ceiling myths that are myths, and be expected to act surprised when universities like Monash report that my resume could receive 57.4% fewer callbacks, all because of my unique-sounding last name. My own identity comes with its battles. But I want the power and the agency to voice them myself. So I ask you this: if my words only carry weight through someone else, are you really listening to me? If our lives are unique, filled with distinct experiences, who could better narrate our stories if not ourselves? The same applies to the marginalized that we seek to speak for. While sharing our concerns for the issues of the world important, it should not be at the expense of those suffering. Additionally, by affirming the position of being such a voice, we propagate structures that deem certain lives, certain voices are inherently worthy of being heard. In maintaining this belief and practice, we reinforced our status, pushing down the very people we seek to aid. In striving to be advocates for the unheard, we dominate over their voices as we speak up and speak for those who we consider are not speaking for themselves. But in reality, they don't need a voice. They already have one. As novelist Adjudicator Roy notes, there really is no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. The problem lies in the fundamental structures of our society that is not built to convey the truths of all. And that is what needs to change. We need societies in which all individuals can speak for themselves, societies in which each voice can carry its own weight. And this needs to be not in the form of some symbolic representation, but in actual substance. The recently contended issue of the Indigenous voice to Parliament is an exemplary example of what we could achieve if we shifted our focus. The current proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by including an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice seeks to acknowledge the past, acknowledge the need for action, and most importantly, prevent endeavours for policy reform to be shut down by successive governments. As Linda Burney, the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, claims, it's about drawing the long line of broken policies and failed programs to an end and listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The change will be empowering, culturally informed, and most crucially, the authentic voice of a community suppressed by our nation's bias. According to the Australia Bureau of Statistics, it is a bias that sees Indigenous people constitute 32% of the national prison population. It is a bias that sees Indigenous youth, 42.2% of them, in and out of home care. It is a bias that sees Indigenous students record the lowest educational outcomes. This bill presents a real chance, a real opportunity for a community forced silence for generations to speak out and loudly demand change. And it's substantial changes such as this that we should achieve. If our intentions are to truly support others, we must learn the spaces that we each occupy and understand there are issues and places where our voices are needed and others where they are not. But this doesn't mean being silent and complacent. Rather, we must empower the voices that carry the truth of their plight. We must strive to bolster these voices, and to do so can be as simple as truly listening to those on the margins. I want you to ask yourself, in the frenzy of international uproar, who am I hearing? What do they say? What do they need? In closely examining such questions, for the first time, we have the genuine capacity to understand the circumstances of others. We put aside the politicians and the polls and really listen to the people at the heart of the conflict. For a brighter world filled with future equal say, our arms should extend in solidarity so that that quiet voice in the corner is brought forward for all to hear. Instead of being a voice for the voiceless, our endeavours should look towards amplifying the voices at the heart of the conflict, the true narrators of their circumstance. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne Mary. Now please welcome Lola Ogunbambi from St. Leonard's College on Bunurong Country with her speech, The Dark Side of Carbon Credits.
"5 years ago, this speech would have been an attempt to convince you of the looming apocalypse that is climate disaster. I would have explained how greenhouse gases work and the problems associated with deforestation, urging you to act. Thankfully, we now live in a very different world. Today, nearly everyone acknowledges the reality of climate change. We, as consumers and voters, have created a world in which corporations proudly claim to be net zero. This discourse is optimistic. When I see energy, mining, and aviation companies making net zero commitments, I feel a sense of enthusiasm. Surely, if these sectors are acting on climate, we will all be okay. That's the narrative. But if I look at this with a critical eye, that optimism is replaced by an underlying sense of mistrust and fear. How can companies burning coal, pumping minerals into the atmosphere, and pumping jet fuel out of planes possibly be carbon neutral? Intuitively, I have a sense that we're being deceived. And that is because we are. While some are taking baby steps towards climate action, too much of their carbon neutrality plans rely on carbon offsets, a problematic solution. Carbon credits and offsets essentially serve as permission slips for emissions. Companies buy these credits to balance out their CO2, eventually resulting in a net zero. When companies talk about being net zero, it doesn't mean that they are producing no carbon emissions, even though it can often seem like it. What is actually happening is that they are paying for another organization to do something positive for the environment. And whilst these endeavours, when done with integrity, can be great, the company which claims to be net zero is still producing carbon. Firstly, let's discuss effectiveness. Many carbon credits are rainforest conservation projects. Creditors claim that without their intervention, these forests would have been logged or otherwise harmed. However, the environmental impact of these projects is often exaggerated. Most of these operate within the Brazilian Amazon, and many of the calculations for forest preservation are outdated, and they were conducted under the leadership of President Jair Bolsonaro, a climate villain who supported logging and turning the Amazon into farmland. Carbon creditors were then working against the Bolsonaro administration. But now the new government, led by Lula da Silva, is actively protecting the rainforests, rendering the conservation efforts of the carbon creditors obsolete. Yet, they still profit. They continue to claim conservation that would have happened anyway. Carbon creditors exaggerating their environmental impact is a major obstacle towards genuine climate action. But this issue with transparency is much more insidious. A recent ABC Four Corners investigation revealed logging operations taking place within protected zones. It is deceitful to say that you are protecting forest and profiting off that protection whilst disguising the fact that logging is occurring. One concern is that carbon offsets lull us into a false sense of security. If we believe that they are effective, we may actually increase our fossil fuels production. And if these offsets are not effective, which is often the case, we're actually creating worse environmental outcomes. So whilst carbon credits and offsets can be environmentally beneficial, deceit undermines their effectiveness as tools for genuine climate action. Secondly, the treatment of traditional landowners by carbon credit companies is disgraceful, perpetuating a new form of carbon colonialism. In Alto Mayo, Peru, people who have lived on and farmed the land for generations are being forcibly removed by park guards funded by conservation companies, losing their homes and their livelihoods. This story is all too familiar. From Uganda to Bangladesh, people's lives are being ruined so that Western corporations can earn what is essentially a green star. In Papua New Guinea, a carbon credit company promised to pay traditional landowners for using their land. Yet, despite making millions of dollars, the landowners have only received pocket change. $80 in 2 years. Let me be plain. They're being taken advantage of and ripped off. Let's take a step back and consider this reality. Wealthy countries, like Australia, have decided that we need to act on climate. This is a good thing. But we've decided that the only economically viable way we could do this is to exploit people overseas in poorer countries. Countries which will face the most acute effects of climate change. Why can't we take responsibility for our own emissions? The third issue is regulatory incompetence. The Australian regulatory body, Climate Active, is often jokingly referred to as climate passive. Carbon credits are regulated by the NGO, Vera, on a global level, but they are limited by a reliance on third-party auditors. A Guardian investigation revealed that 90% of the carbon offsets verified by Vera did not reduce deforestation. What is the point of a regulatory body if 90% of the approved companies are allowed to get away with exaggeration in the best case scenario and lies and exploitation in the worst? The reality is that carbon offsets are one of the easiest ways to tackle climate change. They really do offer positive environmental impacts. Sometimes. What we need to do is make that always, and ensure that traditional landowners aren't being taken advantage of in the process. This can be done in two ways. We must better regulate carbon credits and offsets, and we need to generally reduce our reliance on them. As voters and consumers, we can once again use our voices to demand climate action. This time, we will also demand effectiveness and fairness. As voters, we must call on the government to make climate active the robust regulatory body that their name implies. The body must be assertive in their judgment of the effectiveness of carbon credits and their impacts on traditional landowners. As consumers, we must demand better quality credits and more transparency from companies which use them. Nevertheless, we are relying on carbon credits too much. Legislation should prioritize reducing gross carbon output instead of just net carbon. We can no longer depend on the shallow solution of carbon credits and must seek new, genuine, and creative approaches. And I know that we can.
Thank you, Lola. Now, please welcome Corbin Afanasiev from Nossel High School on Bunurong Country with his speech, The Culture War. Just a reminder for our content warning, if you need to exit, please feel free to do so now.
The world is burning. A climate catastrophe, a ticking time bomb of world-ending proportions is being accelerated by corporate greed. Wars are being waged across the world over arbitrary lines in the ground, leaving hundreds of thousands dead. Protesters, political dissidents, and journalists are being abused, jailed, and killed under authoritarian regimes. Rising cost of living, falling union membership, and stagnating wages create a deadly recipe for poverty, backdropped against record-breaking corporate profits. And yet, despite all these perfectly good reasons to worry, and maybe even panic a little, a chorus of politically influential voices has decided that one issue is certainly far more pressing: the culture war. More specifically, the fight against gender ideology. Drag queens, armed with picture books, are on a mission to convert all of your innocent children to transgenderism. Woke teachers are handing out mutilating hormones at schools, leaving poor parents in the dark about the indoctrination of their poor children. Polyamorous, homosexual, transvestite groomers are fighting to pervert and destroy the sacred institution of marriage, and their ultimate goal being nothing short of the obliteration of Western civilization itself. These statements are saturated with highly emotive buzzwords designed to agitate fear and outrage in the less politically literate. These statements are also blatantly, demonstratively false. Now, it's easy to dismiss these arguments as so clearly hyperbolic that it's pointless to address them at all. Maybe it seems preferable to laugh at and ignore them altogether. This attitude, however, undervalues the very real danger that this rhetoric poses, both at the interpersonal micro level and at the political macro level. Despite the fact that these and all similar culture war arguments achieve little more than diverting political attention away from the real aforementioned crises plaguing our world, it does not mean they are not tangibly life or death for many. The normalization of the trans debate and broadly anti-queer sentiment in modern political discourse has pushed these issues from the fringes of socially unacceptable bigotry into the window of acceptable debate. This has led to dangerous, hateful ideas becoming mainstream, emboldening those who strive to prevent human rights and equality from becoming our cultural status quo. One effect this has on the lives of real people is to limit the access of transgender folk to life-saving medical care. The widespread arguments surrounding trans healthcare have made it politically challenging to provide specialized training for medical practitioners and to fund accessible gender-affirming treatment, especially for young people. In Victoria, children under 16 can technically access a gender clinic. The Adolescent Gender Service at the Royal Children's Hospital, it's the only one in the state, but the wait list is sometimes so prohibitively long that it's not practically accessible for most. Imagine for a moment with me that you're a kid, around 12, and you start to realize something's off. As you enter puberty and attend a single-sex school, something you'd never really thought about, gender, becomes something that causes you severe distress, called gender dysphoria, on a daily basis. So, what do? In an ideal world, you go to your GP and he refers you to the gender clinic. It's not a complex process. You get an initial appointment relatively quickly and you get professional, specialized therapy to help you understand your relationship to your gender, as well as being prescribed puberty blockers, a temporary and reversible measure to put distressing physiological changes on hold until you're old enough to decide whether to allow your natural puberty to go ahead or to go on opposite-sex hormones. The structure is pretty simple. What happened to me, however, was my GP failed to even mention, let alone refer me to the RCH gender service. It took 3 years and a diagnosis of anorexia, which I developed as a way to mediate the dysphoria I felt by minimizing visible secondary sex characteristics. This is far from uncommon, as a 2015 study found that transgender individuals were 4 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than their cisgender counterparts. Only then was I referred to the waiting list, and then spent another 2 years on that waiting list due to severe underfunding and understaffing. A consequence of the aforementioned political barriers. By the time I got to my initial appointment, 5 years after first presenting signs of gender dysphoria, I was finally unceremoniously shoved into the private sector to get the treatment I needed because I was too old. I wish my story was unique, but unfortunately it's the last thing from it. You have to understand, life-saving treatment is not an exaggeration. On top of the prevalence of eating disorders in the transgender community, gender-affirming treatment has been found to reduce the risk of suicide among trans individuals consistently. An Australian study conducted in 2021 found that 41% of trans participants, more than half, have attempted suicide. This number drops drastically with a supportive family and social circle, medical care, legal transition, and support from their community. The study also cites interpersonal microaggressions as an exacerbating factor of suicidality, which I don't think I have to spell out for you, are not decreased by the cultural narrative that frames all queer people as an abomination upon this world, a vermin to be eradicated from public life. This narrative emboldens neo-Nazis to march brazenly in the streets of our own city, not a kilometre from where we're gathered today. Because this is not just an American issue. It's more than a Twitter argument gone sour. The narrative being pushed by American politicians and media is being swallowed hook, line, and sinker by Australians and people worldwide. It's right here in Melbourne, in the Monash City Council, that the same hateful groups and their sympathisers have bombarded threats of violence and intimidation at a drag performer, resulting in the cancellation of an event planned to celebrate the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. That is the crux of my point here. The culture war in the abstract is not as catastrophic as climate change or war or famine. This world, however, is not abstract. The people under attack are not hypothetical talking points. We are flesh and blood. The hate-filled rhetoric of transphobia leaves real people dead, killed by social pressure, forced into the closet, denied medical care, forced into the street, into homelessness, or just outright murdered. It's not pointless to push back. It is crucial to not let these ideas become calcified into our culture's status quo. So make sure to challenge transphobic beliefs in your social circle where possible. Write to your representatives, donate to LGBTQ charities, attend rallies and protests, be a visible ally and protect your trans siblings. This is a matter of life and death.
Thank you, Corbin. Now please welcome Hiranaka Ekanayaka from Melbourne High School on Bunurong Country with his speech, Coconut.
Our culture shapes who we are. Whether it be the food that we eat, the festivals that we celebrate, or the values that we hold, we all have a culture that we can identify with. But what if I told you, for some time, I did not know my culture at all? For one word, one description, had me questioning it all. Imagine a budding 6-year-old boy with the chubbiest of cheeks going to his first day of school in Australia. He knows very little English. He has no friends. He does not know anything about Australian culture or slang. He gets up in front of the class and the teacher asks him, "What's your name?" He replies timidly in a thick Sri Lankan accent, "Hiranaka." The class repeats, "Hiranaka?" He corrects them, "No, Hiranaka." And the class yet again goes, "Oh, Hiranaka." And this chubby 6-year-old boy slowly nods his head up and down. Yes, Hiranaka. 11 years later, here I am again speaking in front of an audience. But now I can formulate eloquent phrases of English. I made valuable friendships and I understand the Australian culture and slang. And now people call me just Hero. That's the beauty about it. Culture is fluid. However, sometimes when you try to mix two fluids together, instead of combining to create a solution, they layer on top of each other, creating this mess. And that was my issue. The fact that my Australian and my Sri Lankan identity were having a never-ending tug-of-war with each other. The tension in the rope growing every single day. About to snap. A coconut. That was the word. Brown on the outside, white on the inside. It wasn't racist, it wasn't offensive. It was the truth. Because one of my feet was planted in the tropical jungle country of Sri Lanka, with its golden beaches and friendly people, with its Sri Lankan chicken curry and my cousins and grandparents. Every time I visit, it's home to me. But my other foot was planted in the metropolis coffee-loving city of Melbourne, with its vibrant nightlife and cold winter air, with its steaks topped off with mushroom sauce and my closest and dearest friends. Every day I wake up, it's home to me. And having my feet in two separate places over 8,000 kilometers away from each other created this conflict. I did not know where I belonged. And I'm very inflexible, so doing the splits over 8,000 kilometers is quite tough. But that was when I made one realization. All my life, I've been wondering whether I was Sri Lankan or Australian, Australian or Sri Lankan. But the reality is, I am neither. I am what is called a third culture kid, someone who was raised during my schooling years in a country that I nor my parents were born in. And that is my greatest gift. I embody Australian values, mateship, showing justice, friendship, loyalty. I speak untranslatable Sri Lankan words, wastua, a term of endearment that's closest translation is my everything. I practice Sri Lankan beliefs, meditation, the art of calming the mind, and I savour Australian dishes, a sweet Tim Tam with its signature crunch. As a third culture kid, I am a mix of both my Sri Lankan and Australian identities, and I am not the only one. According to the Australian Human Rights Commission, 1 in 4 Australians were born overseas and 1 in 2 have a parent that was born overseas. This rich cultural diversity is one of our nation's greatest strengths and is essential to not just our own identities, but also our nation's. Being a third culture kid has had a profound impact on my personal growth. Navigating between two cultures hasn't always been easy, but it's taught me to be appreciative and it's taught me to be open, understanding diverse perspectives. There's this term, ethnocentrism, which is where you view another culture based on your own cultural lens. It's the usual view of most people. On my first week of school in Australia, I bought a delicious Sri Lankan chicken curry. And so at lunch, I dug in with my hands, scooping the chicken and the rice into one perfect, delicious ball of goodness. But that was when I started to hear whispers. Why is he eating like that? Does he not have a spoon? What a weirdo. You see, my classmates looked down on me, viewing my actions as weird and odd simply because they were viewing my actions through their cultural lens, through their ethnocentric perspective. But instead of looking down, we should acknowledge that there are different ways of doing things across the globe and even right here in Australia. That instead of weird or odd, it's simply different. And these different ways of doing, different ways of thinking, different ways of being exposed to the world has taught me to see cultures being more than just black and white. Has taught me to see cultures as more than wrong and right. And I'm not the only one who's benefited from being a third culture kid. Barack Obama, born to a Kenyan father and American mother, spent most of his formative years in both the US and Indonesia. These three cultures undoubtedly birthed his leadership style, and as he eloquently put it, as a third culture kid, I learned that true strength lies in embracing our differences and finding common ground to build a better world. It's a perspective we need more of. Perspective. It's funny how perspective can change. Because going back to that moment when I was 6 years old with my chubby cheeks, I now realize that the issue wasn't that these two cultures were like a separated solution. It was the fact that I didn't stir hard enough to mix them both in. And I also learned that I am more flexible than I once thought, for I can stride the world and call Sri Lanka and Australia, Australia and Sri Lanka, these two places over 8,000 kilometers away from each other, my homes.
Thank you, Hironaka. Now please welcome Ananya Srihari, our second student from Nossal High School on Bunurong Country, with her speech, Material Success.
It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Wise words said by the fox from The Little Prince. Centering a young prince as he explores planets, encounters odd characters, and learns valuable life lessons on the importance of friendship and keeping a childlike viewpoint. The Little Prince is a novel I read first at age 6 and once again just recently, where I found it took on a new light as I looked at it from a new perspective. Nearing the end of high school, I'm often wrapped up in SAC scores, scaling points, and stress. I find myself becoming undoubtedly jaded at this process, as the world feels like it's moving entirely too fast for the pace that I'm at. It can become frustrating. Our productivity as people takes priority. Even on a Sunday night after I finished all of my homework, a quiet voice questions me. Why are you relaxing when you could be revising? I think this often happens because we're told that taking life as it comes is simply not enough. We must be constantly working ahead and doing work behind the scenes that nobody else is doing. Firstly, though, there is privilege in criticizing our society's focus on money and on work culture. In a place where jobs are becoming more competitive and living is becoming more expensive, money is undoubtedly important. However, today, I would like to speak to the value of interpersonal relationships and the sacrifices in pursuing material success, rather than criticizing a desire for wealth. Our success is sold to us, primarily through self-help, whether this be coaches, programs, or books. This industry is estimated to be worth $13.2 billion. In a world with all of this information at our fingertips, we're expected to have everything worked out. Andrew Tate, a controversial public figure. Whilst not explicitly self-help, his content focuses on topics such as personal development and fitness. Although recently he's been characterized by his misogynistic and violent rhetoric. Rhetoric that argues that women are to be subservient and engages in graphic depictions of violence against them. Many people believe he is some kind of cultural anomaly and question, why are young men so attracted to his content? But I don't think it's the bigotry, nor the controversy. I believe Tate's lavish lifestyle, paired with his tremendous focus on self-improvement, are simply a direct reflection of what we have come to value in our individualistic and materialistic society. When these young men have been primed their entire lives to idolize the dollar signs and to continuously work hard, even when it becomes overwhelming, the mansions, the lavish houses, and the constant hustle are not only incredibly attractive, but aspirational, with many of his fans finding his content at a young and impressionable age. When this starts to become dangerous is when our attraction to these glamorous facades leads us into unknowingly subscribing to violent and hateful agendas. So, when Tate begins to preach these words to his fans, often they can be blinded by the glittering gold mouthpiece they're hearing from. Although this is a more serious example, there are more subtle ways that these figures can exert influence over our lives. Tate uses his appeal to sell his online programs and courses, commodifying his aspirational, confident, go-getter persona. We believe that these people want to show us a solution. You know, fill that void that we might have, similar to that thing I have on the Sunday afternoon. But before you show anybody a solution, you have to make them believe they have a problem, that they are not smart enough, that they are not strategic enough, and maybe most of all, that they are not hardworking enough. Maybe you open up a self-help podcast. It can offer different advice and methods for personal development. But similarly, it is filled with a lot of buzzwords. Words like flow state and law of attraction. Ultimately, all this content has similar messaging. Focus on yourself and focus on your work. This pushes us into a mentality in which we believe that our growth is a solely individual journey. These personalities worship wealth and leave no room for weakness, and no room for other people. Social connection is often emphasized as something we should turn to as a means to balance our lives as we focus elsewhere. Even though as humans, we are social beings first. It is rarely emphasized as something we should actively invest in. This is not helped by the fact that Australia today is isolated. Ray Oldenburg coined the term third place. It refers to a place that is not our home, which is our first place, and not our work or school, which is our second place. It is another place in which we can establish community connection. This could be public library or community centre. But suburban Australia today does not facilitate for these places, often prioritising residential development over community involvement. It is also not helped by the fact that we are in an extremely car-driven society, and one where we have spent more time in our homes than ever before. Interpersonal relationships can present in any number of ways in our lives, whether that be through our family, friends, or community. But what remains the same is the words of the fox. What is essential is invisible to the eye. These relationships are entirely irreplaceable. Investing time into others and being understood by them helps us understand ourselves and the ever-changing world around us. Even science has shown similar conclusions, with PhD Julianne Holt-Lundstad's study showing that the effects of having few friends or poor quality friendships over the course of a lifetime can have the same effects as smoking 10 cigarettes per day. We simply cannot survive investing all our time into our material pursuits. Circling back to The Little Prince, I believe looking back helped me find clarity. The prince exclaims after one of his journeys, "People, they grow 5,000 roses in one garden, yet they don't find what they're looking for." It highlights a feeling of emptiness and confinement that can come from solely focusing on our material pursuits. What value does a rose hold if you have no reason for growing it? As have I explained today, we can become bogged down by our toxic media that glorifies isolation and self-interest. Even more so, we can become disoriented by the flurry of self-help products that grow off these ideologies. And even to the societies we live in, ones that don't value our own interpersonal connection. Although we cannot dismantle these complex systems, we can try and help ourselves. So slow down for a moment, take a breath, and consider what you value most. Put time into the activities you love and hold on tightly onto the people you love. As in a world that is constantly trying to imprison us with the chains of expectation, isolation, and fear, we mustn't imprison ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananya. Now, for the final presentation in the prepared speech section, please welcome Wesley Chen from Caulfield Grammar School on Boonwurrung Country with his speech, The Importance of Linguistic Heritage in a World of Globalization.
"5 years ago, in a world before COVID, I found myself standing face to face with my grandpa. He was visiting from China on a holiday trip and decided to stop by Melbourne to see us. It had been almost a decade since he last visited. I still remember those first words he said to me at that family reunion. He said, 小孩子这么大了. I stared back at him blankly. We stood there silently. At that moment, I realized that I couldn't understand him. Since that interaction with my grandpa, I knew I had to do something about it. About the embarrassment I felt. About the frustration of not being able to speak to my own grandpa. I spent 2 years in middle school studying Chinese, and in my spare time, I visited art galleries and museums to read more about my culture. I came to learn that my grandpa was commenting on how much I've grown since the last time he saw me. In reflection, it's a regrettable reality of how quickly first-generation immigrants lose connection with their culture. Chinese festivals were never a big part of my family's calendar. I would often realize an event on the day it occurred, and celebrations didn't go beyond a trip to the park. As a small child, I loved going on these walks, especially during the windy days of April when I would fly my bright red kite, which I affectionately named Bob. Without even knowing it, I was actually participating in the hallmark tradition of kite flying, which Qingming Festival is known for. However, mesmerized in my adventures with Bob, I had little idea of the deeper significance of commemorating past ancestors. Much later, I also learned that Qingming Festival is not just a cultural holiday, but also marks an extraordinary intellectual achievement. Through observing the sun's position in the sky, the ancient Chinese created 24 solar terms to explain seasonal changes in their environment. Qingming, one of the seasonal solar terms, signals the most optimal time for farmers to start ploughing and sowing for spring. When we lose the ability to communicate in a certain language, we lose the chance to learn about the traditional wisdoms of that culture, knowledge which has been distilled and refined through countless generations. Moreover, the impact of language loss extended beyond just my family life. I remember the summer of 2020 when I visited my local community's Lantern Festival. To my dismay, I felt estranged. Like a tourist disembarking from a plane in a foreign country, I felt welcomed as an outsider. I couldn't speak to the dragon dancers in my heritage language, and I relied on my hybrid of English and Chinese to order my dumplings. Once again, I found myself embarrassed and isolated. Language is essential to community living, and more importantly, to acquire a sense of belonging. But my personal identity crisis is a small fraction of how our world is gravitating away from tradition, and the value of heritage is slowly diminishing. This movement began during the age of discovery of the 15th century. The greatest impact that resulted from this time was the rise of colonialism, which still exists today. One effect of colonialism was the marginalization of minority languages, and by extension, their speakers. Those living under Britain's colonial rule were taught to read and write in English. It was a method which claimed to educate, but was in fact a means of systematically eradicating entire cultures. This phenomenon was experienced by communities across the world, but none so much as those which occupied Australia before the settlers. Indigenous Australians were not only physically abused, but they were also culturally oppressed by having their language rights taken away. English was imposed on them against their free will, and the youth were taught to reject their traditional values for those of Britons. Fortunately, we've come to understand just how morally incorrect this was, but the damage is yet to be repaired. Since 1991, the percentage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who spoke a native language at home declined from 16.5% to 9.5%, and the trend continues. The essence of cultural preservation lies within the ability to sustain language, and practicing traditional languages, whether written or spoken, is a fundamental right. In support of this view, the United Nations created the Universal Declaration of Linguistic Rights in 1996, a document which outlined the freedom to communicate in any language of choosing. It states, different languages and different ways of speaking are not only a means of communication, they are also the milieu, a person's social environment in which humans grow and cultures are built. This means that language and culture are intrinsically tied together. Therefore, denying one's language would be equivalent to violating their human rights. But the road to recovery isn't so simple. As a product of the colonial age, English has become too widespread. So widespread that it has become a means to achieving a successful career. In the 21st century, the choice to learn English isn't really a choice anymore. Take Singapore, for example. In 1987, it adopted English as an official language, given its importance for business, diplomacy, and technology. Their schools now use English to teach most subjects, including math, science, and even history. This decision was made by the government out of the interest for economic gain. But Singapore's language evolution is coming at a tremendous cost. Whilst the nation is increasingly getting better at their English, other traditionally spoken languages are slowly waning. Of the 4 official languages, English is by far the most spoken in Singaporean homes, whilst Malay and Tamil barely combine to make just 1/10 of the population. Like Australia, they too are suffering the loss of cultural heritage. Roughly 6,500 languages are still being spoken today, but sadly, more and more are on the path to extinction. Clearly, something must change. If we want to keep living in a culturally diverse world, we must protect minority groups, and it begins with their language. Like any young person like myself who has lost touch with their culture, I urge you to reconnect with your heritage. Although I can't say I've fully done so myself, I'm a whole lot closer than I was 5 years ago. I'm now able to have conversations with my grandpa, and he still comments on how much I've grown.
Thank you, Wesley. What an amazing set of speeches. Can we please give our speakers a big round of applause? The adjudicators will now leave to consolidate their notes. We will now have a short intermission as well. The impromptu section of the event will commence in 20 minutes' time. For now, please help yourself to refreshments that we have set up at the back of the room, and I'll see you again soon.
Hi everyone, sorry, just to update, the adjudicators are still deliberating, so it'll be about another 5 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. We will now move on to the impromptu section of the morning. For the impromptu section, one by one in the same order as the prepared speeches, our speakers will enter the preparation room. This is how it works. Speakers are given a topic and 4 minutes to prepare immediately before they present the impromptu speech. All students will speak on the same topic. The time allowed for the impromptu speech is 3 minutes. A warning bell will sound at 2 minutes and a final bell at 3 minutes. The prompt they will be responding to is, failure brings opportunity. The impromptu section this morning is worth 40% of each speaker's overall mark, so no pressure. While we wait for our first speaker to rejoin us, let's sit back and listen to what Rani has in store for us. Now, please welcome back Anne Mary Chalakal from Loreto College, Ballarat, Wadawurrung Country.
In 2014, one image dominated all of Australian media. A young, beautiful boy lying face down on the sands of an Australian beach. So peaceful, so gentle, but the boy had passed away. He had passed away because he had fallen off of the boat that himself and countless other refugees had been on, with life jackets filled with holes, essentially drowning them. This boy had turned up on Australian shores, dead. And it was such a controversy at the time because of Australia's refugee policies. And that's what I want to address today. It is no secret that Australia has a dark past with refugees. But with failure brings an opportunity. And I am here to warn us all that if we do not take these multiple failures as an opportunity to reflect on our government policies and our mistreatment of one of the most vulnerable populations currently in the face of war, we have no one to blame but ourselves. The 1951 Convention on the Status of the Refugee stipulates that Any individual that fits under the guideline of an asylum seeker or a refugee must be granted asylum by the state that has agreed upon to it. Australia is a signatory and has ratified this convention, but we don't follow the rules. Not because we're cool and hip, merely because it doesn't fit our national interest to keep the borders safe, to allow poor migrants seeking war, political dissidents to come to Australia. The John Howard government in particular were under fire by Oxfam International, who deemed their solution to this problem, to send refugees off to an offshore detention centre, to be inhumane. That was in 2011, but we did not learn our lesson. We have failed numerous times, and we see it. We are being publicly criticised by other states for our failure to assist the vulnerable. So why do we not learn? Why do we not allow individuals an access to a safe haven when it is completely within our rights and our capacity to do so? We have failed the most vulnerable. We cannot continue to fail them. To change, we must get rid of these offshore detention centres that do no good beyond trap them for an indefinite period of time. We must instead focus towards programs that assist refugees to transition into Australian society easier. These migrants, they perhaps don't speak English, but have probably received some of the highest degrees of education in their home country, in their mother tongue. I'm a migrant. An economic migrant. I had the capacity to come here, so why can't a refugee? We never want to see such an image again. So whilst we may have failed numerous times, use this as an opportunity to reflect and change, because we can never have it happen again. Thank you.
Please welcome back Lola Ogunbambi from St Leonard's College, Boonwurrung Country.
We have failed young modern men. In response to the years of patriarchy and gender-based oppression, we have done a lot of really great things to create a more equal world. We've rightly recognised the negative effects that years of patriarchy that we have lived under have had on women and other marginalised groups, and the fact that this power structure continues to proliferate. Some of our responses have prompted great social change, and there are other places where we need to do more. But in other respects, our responses have failed. Unfortunately, in an attempt to stop the patriarchy, we've sometimes misunderstood the issues and misunderstood who is most negatively affected by this. We have needed a villain. This story of oppression and inequality is something that we cannot look at as a problem that we all have to work together to fix, but something that there needs to be some dark monster that is the cause of it. And for some reason, our rhetoric reflects that it is men. All men. And not everyone spreads this rhetoric, but it is present enough that young boys in schools feel like they are being told that they are the problem. And I know that sometimes this rhetoric of, oh, men are the victim is used to justify more patriarchy. But I think that there is an opportunity to reflect on how sometimes our language has failed and we've pushed people outside of the mainstream and made them feel like they have to turn to some darker place that makes them actually a monster. So, as failure brings opportunity, let's reflect on this failure and see how we can respond to it and create a truly equal world. So, these boys that have been told that their masculinity, in an attempt to fight toxic masculinity, have been told that all masculinity is bad, or have been told that they can't talk to women, or been told all sorts of things that devalue their experience. They've been told, or they've heard the message, regardless of whether or not they've been told, that they don't have real problems. They turn to the manosphere. They turn into 4chan and Reddit, where ideas of incels and pickup artists come up, and these people, some of the things that they say on there are so terrible, it makes your skin crawl. And when you first hear people saying how the government should introduce state-mandated girlfriends, you want to throw up. You are disgusted. How can someone write something like this? They are the villain. They are the dark monster. But also, they are the victim. Now, I'm not saying we have to deal with the ideas that they have, but we have to recognize this failure and look at the opportunity this has to open dialogue with them and make sure that people aren't pushed out into the caves that make them the dark, scary incel monsters over and over again. Thank you.
Please welcome back Corbin Afanasiev from Nossal High School, Bunurong Country.
You are surrounded by opportunities, most of which you'll never see, let alone seize. Whether it be painting your next magnum opus, or starting a startup to become a multi-million-dollar business, or picking up a hobby to be your lifelong passion, there are so many options for you to try. But most of them, you'll never be able to attempt, not until you're forced to. Failure brings opportunity. There's a reason they say that when one door closes, another opens. For example, in 2020, the Cranbourne train line went down. The big build has been disruptive to all of us, and to me that meant I couldn't really get to school, but I tried something new. I picked up the bike that had been rusting in my garage, and I decided, maybe I'll try cycling to school. Now, 3 years later, I still cycle to school, and I reckon cycling is my favorite hobby. Since then, I've cycled around Port Phillip Bay, around Western Port, and I've got many more bikepacking trips ahead of me. And all because one train line stopped running for a couple of months. You're surrounded by opportunity, and it's important to be able to grasp at it when it's given to you. I've encouraged others to try cycling and to commute that way. And I think that that's brought about good change in my community. When something stands in your way, you have to find another route to get around it. And when you look at all of your options and think about it really, you might just find something that makes you a better off person. Thank you.
Please welcome back Hiranaka Ekanayaka from Melbourne Grammar School, Boonwurrung Country.
I must unfortunately concede that I used to be addicted to my phone. I used to scroll day upon day from video to video, and it felt like I was stuck in this cycle. I kept missing out on schoolwork, I kept missing out on meeting with friends, and I kept missing out on seeing the fundamentals of life. And so as a result, I saw my grades lower. I saw this feeling of being less motivated. And when the end of semester exams came, I ended up failing. Failing not only in my grades, but with myself, and failing to see the little things in life as precious as they are. So I decided to do a little research. I decided to see why a phone was so addictive and why it was sucking all the life out of me. And I realized that it releases a substance called dopamine. Now, 1 in 4 Australians suffer from anxiety. 1 in 2, half the people in this room will have a mental health episode. And these staggering facts are because we are feeling less motivated in this modern day and age because of our dependence on dopamine. Because when we take our phone out and when we scroll, we get this constant influx of happiness. But this failure opened my horizons, opened my interest and curiosity into seeing why I failed. And I realized that there are different ways of achieving dopamine. You can have a cold shower. It increases dopamine by 200%. You can go for runs. It increases it up to 150%. And I ended up finding happiness through the simple things in life. And so I deleted TikTok. I deleted these rabbit holes that kept me from achieving my goals. And my grades got better, and my mental health improved. You see, this failure to live up to the standards that were put with me helped me to find an opportunity to improve myself. And improvement is what human nature is all about. So I implore you in the audience, if you feel like you're in a rut, if you feel like sometimes these sources of instant dopamine are taking out your motivation, I urge you, find dopamine in the simple things in life. Go for a run, take a cold shower, talk to your friends, and maybe somehow conceding that you had a failure in this aspect will give you the opportunity to find happiness. Thank you.
Let's now welcome back Ananya Srihari from Nossal High School, Bunurong Country.
A common experience. You walk into a new class at a new school. You're seated at your new desk. You look across the room. You see a person you think is so interesting. I wish I could be friends with them. So for the rest of the class, you daydream and you think about, how will I approach them? How will I initiate this new friendship? Time ticks by and then the class is over and I haven't said a single word. Now what do? Have I missed out on this incredible friendship? How will I ever talk to them? People might tell you, well, this failure has brought you a new opportunity. You can try again tomorrow. But in reality, you might sit for entire years staring at that person, wishing you could be friends, and nothing ever comes of it. In reality, failure does not bring opportunity. All it does is hint at it. What really brings opportunity is our willingness to take action on our own fate. In my personal life, I go to a selective school. I'm constantly surrounded by people who are doing the best in whatever field they invest in. Often I can feel like I'm not doing as much as they are. I feel that I'm moving too slow and that maybe I should work a little bit more. But I think that staying in these attitudes and just constantly feeling like I'm not meeting my potential will not do anything. I need to consider what I'm not doing enough of and where my weaknesses lie. And that's where opportunity comes and where I can find my true potential. It doesn't happen with just failing and thinking, well, I can do better next time. And this is even more critical on a global scale. When people's voices are being silenced and when we are not servicing people that need it most, we can see failure. But this failure does not bring opportunity. People can continuously be silenced for generations and generations. Where opportunity comes is when we give these people a voice, when we give them resources, and when we give them our own ears, when we're able to listen to them. So whether that be in industries where there is not enough female representation, whether this be in the Indigenous voice to Parliament, whether this be in any other facet of our lives, we cannot just say that failure brings opportunity, when failure only really shows us what we could have done better. Opportunity comes when we consider how we can improve and reach an arm out and take the opportunity to us, rather than having failure bring it. Thank you.
Finally, please welcome back Wesley Chen from Caulfield Grammar School, Boonwurrung Country, for our last speech of the morning.
John F. Kennedy once said that the Chinese character for crisis is made up of two strokes. The first stroke represents danger, and the second stroke represents opportunity. In recent times, certainly in the 21st century, we've undergone some of the hardest periods in humanity. In 2020, we observed the pandemic, bushfires, and even to this day, international conflict ravages across the world. However, it is only through our failures and our times of hardship that we can grow and explore new opportunities. My experience of the COVID pandemic would be quite different to yours. I thought the pandemic was a time of reflection, not a time of failure. I thought the pandemic was a time where I could spend with my family and reconnect with the things that matter most to me. However, my classmates begged to differ. My classmates complained about being able to stay home. My classmates complained about not being able to travel beyond a 5-mile radius. However, we need to, as a society, realize how fortunate we are to live in a first world country. Pessimism is a luxury. Optimism is a moral choice. To be pessimistic is to be privileged. You can only complain about staying home and being locked in your house if you have a house. You can only complain about having these tight regulations which serve to restrict the pandemic if you have a government willing to enforce and prioritize lives over others. Australia certainly needs to change its attitudes. Australia needs to embrace its challenges and recognize that through these periods of hardship, there can always be a better future for the country, a better future for the individual. Everyone in life walks a staircase. Some have a staircase longer than others. However, we're only able to reach the top through walking up every single step. And sometimes we fall off that staircase. Sometimes we have to go back 3 or 4 steps. However, we must keep persisting forward and embracing every opportunity that comes our way, including those through times of failure. Everyone lives a staircase and everyone walks a staircase in life. The question is, where does your staircase lead and how are you going to get there?
Well done to all 6 speakers on their impromptu speeches. The adjudicators have a difficult task ahead of them. At this stage, I would like to acknowledge our event sponsor, the Australia-Britain Society. The VCAA is grateful to the Society who have, as you have heard, supported this award since its first incarnation in 1977. They are providing the trophies for today's winner and runner-up, readings book vouchers for all state finalists, and a luncheon for state finalists and their guests. I would now like to invite Acting VCAA Chair Rob Fernside on stage to present certificates to all of our state finalists. Congratulations to Anne Mary Talakal from Loreto College, Ballarat, Wadawurrung Country. Lola Ogunbambi from St. Leonard's College. Oh. Lola Ogunbambi from St. Leonard's College, Bunurong Country. Corbin Afanasiev from Nossal High School, Bunurong Country.
Congratulations. Terrific speech.
Hironaka Ekanayaka from Melbourne Grammar School, Bunurong Country. Ananya Srihari from Nossal High School, Bunurong Country.
Well done. That's for you.
And Wesley Chen from Caulfield Grammar School, Bunurong Country.
Congratulations. Oh yes, open the wood so we can see it. Yep. Okay.
Another thank you and congratulations to all of our speakers. Now, I'd like to play a short video message from our PISA State finalist from 2022, Anna Blinks van Brokenhoven. Anna won the Plain English Speaking Award State Final in 2022 and competed in the national final. Since then, Anna has moved to Brisbane to be closer to extended family. She's also deferred a double degree in commerce and arts to spend time gaining hands-on work experience and volunteering with various organisations and groups before continuing her academic studies in 2024. Anna has some excellent advice for anyone here or on the live stream considering competing in the award next year, so take note.
Competing in the Plain English Speaking Awards was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I love that it pushed me to refine and recalculate my ideas, figure out how best to present them, in what way to say them, what method and what mode should I speak in. I learned how to truly refine my arguments through rigorous rewrites and sometimes ruthless alterations. Yet one of the most surprising and enjoyable aspects was the camaraderie and friendships that it brought. I got to meet other students who were driven and passionate, some talking about topics I'd never even heard of. There's something about the shared moments in the waiting rooms, the collective mix of fear, excitement, joy, terror that bonds people together. There are friendships I made that I hope will last me for years to come, and I hope some of you can create similar bonds today. PISA also taught me to trust myself and my ideas. My thoughts and opinions on issues that affect me are valid. They're worth hearing and worth being shared. It gave me confidence to speak out when I felt I had something to say, and to not discount my thoughts and ideas. If I can give some advice to students, it's this. 1, take the pressure off. Today isn't all about winning. Is that the goal? Yes. But part of the beauty of PISA is getting to see a group of bright young students get up and share their ideas with us. And you're going to do that, no matter what. One thing I did was, even before the competition started, I'd tell myself I'd already lost. Because for me, that took the pressure off. If I'd already lost, it meant I didn't have to compare myself to other people around me. I could just focus on what I was doing and doing my best. And considering where it got me, it worked out pretty well. This may not work for you, but I do highly suggest that today, don't think about trying to win. Think about giving the best speech you possibly can. 2. The art of the pause. Not every argument needs to be rushed, and in the right context, a pause can give your audience time to reflect on what you've said, you a second to breathe, and it adds gravitas to your sentence. If you get up on stage today and there's a moment where you freeze, or something happens, and you drop your cue cards, or whatever it may be, take a second, take a moment. Don't be afraid to pause, breathe, and keep going. It's okay. Number 3, make it personal. Again, this doesn't work for every argument, but if you can speak from true life experiences, then not only is your argument 10 times stronger, but you're able to speak from the heart and connect with your audience on a highly personal level. As you get up on stage today and speak, look at the people in the audience. Connect with them on a human level. Something admittedly tricky to do behind a screen. But there's something magical about when you know the words. You've done it 1,000 times. All you have to do is tell us. At the end of the day, public speaking is just talking to people on a slightly larger scale. You've got this. You can do this. You've put in hours and hours of work, and the time has come to show off how amazing and incredible you are. If you walk out of here with a trophy or not, you made it to the state finals. And that in itself is an incredible achievement. It shows your dedication, determination, and commitment. I sincerely hope that all of you have had a fantastic time competing, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Those were some lovely words from Anna, and I completely agree with her point about public speaking just being talking to people, but on a larger scale. Especially for my impromptus, I just like to imagine that I was having a really deep and insightful conversation with my friend, but my friend was an audience full of people whose faces I may or may not have been able to see. So with that, we enter our final break. The adjudicators will return soon, so don't go too far, and until then, I welcome Rani back to the stage.
everyone. Sorry for the delay. Could we just ask all the state finalists come down the front and out the back? We're just going to have a quick discussion after their photo.
Please welcome back our adjudicators after what I know has been a robust conversation to reach a decision. Now it is my pleasure to invite Beck Kavana, Travis Lyons and Tierney Khan to the stage to speak briefly about today's competition before Beck, our head adjudicator, will deliver the results. I invite acting VCAA Chair Rob Fernside to the stage. Actually, we'll leave that for a little bit later, but I'll invite the adjudicators up to the stage.
Okay, of course that's going to need to be a bit higher. Congratulations, everyone. As I had an opportunity to tell you guys just outside, it was robust means that we've had a vicious fight with each other, and our friendships have all ended. No, it was genuinely a very, very excellent final today, and it's a credit to all of you. When we have these discussions and when we have to come to a very challenging decision, that reflects the quality of the finals. So congratulations to each of you. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what each of you gets up to in your lives and careers. I'm sure it will be very, very, very impressive and very special. My job today is to talk about the prepared speech. I will do so briefly. There is a mercy rule. Someone is allowed to tackle me if I go over 3 minutes and take me off stage. Miranda did talk about the hook earlier. I've never seen it, but I think I'm probably most under threat. Look, it was really, really nice today to see a real breadth of topics that reflected a real breadth of your interests. You're clearly I do say this every year, but it's something that's actually true of the competition every year. You're very passionate people, and you're very passionate about some topics and themes that are really, really bloody hard to get your head around. And so to see that expounded in such a interesting way today was really, really, really cool. You're also all very competent speakers. Okay? You're very good at using your voices, at holding yourself with confidence, at having that stage presence as well. There were some themes of general feedback across the entire group today that will really take an excellent speech to amazing, outstanding. I think the first and sort of it's in the name that we sort of have to talk about it is the use of plain English. What I see a lot of students do at this competition, and I think it was also true of this year, is write an essay and then try and give it as a speech. So in your speech writing process, when you're actually writing the speech, getting up, standing in your room and talking the speech out loud will really help you to hear whether or not your language is punching and it's hitting, and whether it's becoming a little bit too complex or flowery. Some things that sound really good on an essay and get you that excellent mark on a SAC don't necessarily come across the same way in a speech. So really practicing a speech and before you've even written all of it, just standing up and seeing how it sounds is a really good skill that will help to move your speeches into the next sort of realm. I think another thing that can help support that as well is actually talking to your friends about the topic and delivering the speech to your friends as well, because that will help you practice convincing people, really dealing with those nutty issues and getting that sort of real-time feedback about your speech, such that you can help not only develop the way that you're giving the speech and delivering your content, but also actually how you're developing your arguments as well. Because there are a few things that when we sort of had our discussion, we're like, oh, they said this or they said that, which we're always going to do, but those things may have been a little bit more obvious to you if you'd sort of gone through that process of talking to your friends. Some of those things that you'll miss will actually come to you via that. And that's perfectly legitimate. That's not plagiarising. It's actually part of the process of speaking. These are nitty-gritties. These are the little things that will really carry a good speech into that excellent range. I don't want to give you the sense that they weren't good. They were excellent, okay? But I think I've had my allotted time, so I better hand over to Tierney.
All right, I'm going to give some impromptu feedback quickly. So just to begin with, the impromptu is always so great because we really do get to hear what you care about and we get to see your passion shine through. And that was really evident again this year. There was, to echo what Travis said about the prepareds, the breadth of kind of takes and angles you guys all did for the same topic was really good to see. And the passion that you all had, again, was really, really good to see. Just in something to work on going forward. Again, just making sure when you're in the preparation room that you have a clear contention, you have something that you know that you'll walk away from and will be like, that's what they were saying. If you get a bit lost in the middle, you want to, have something that you can kind of draw yourself back to and kind of ground your speech with. Structure is really hard. It's really hard to attempt a structure in an impromptu, but it is such a skill and does benefit your speech so much more if you can kind of have a structure that runs through it. Even like simple tools, kind of like how does this affect me personally, my community, globally, just some tools like that to bring in that can really help ground your speech as well. Sometimes the biggest piece of advice is just to take a breath. Just stand there and breathe for a second before you get into it. Kind of, I always say it's your space. It's 3 minutes, well, you can tell us whatever you want to tell us and we have to listen. Taking a breath can sometimes help you just command that space and command the room. And don't attempt too much. It's 3 minutes. You don't have that long. It feels like forever when you're up here, but it's not. And we sometimes see some topics that are really, really big and you don't have the time to address all of the nuance to it. Sometimes it's better to pick a simpler topic and do it really well than attempt too much and kind of leave some things unsaid. But apart from that, big congratulations again. And now I'm going to pass over to Beck. No, Zuva. I'm going to pass to Zuva.
Thank you so much to our adjudicators for that feedback. Now, I would like to welcome Beck to the stand to announce something that is happening for arguably the first time in PISA history. She's going to announce our winner and runner-up, but we're actually going to be doing a tiebreaker this afternoon. So instead of having our winner and runner-up confirmed right now, they are going to have to do another impromptu. So that'll be quite exciting. And then the adjudicators will then deliberate and come to us with our winner. So yeah, I'll invite Beck up to speak.
Thank you. This is unprecedented for us, but I think really speaks to the quality and passion that people shared their ideas with us this afternoon. So we'll be announcing the winner and runner-up, but not in any particular order right now. Before I do, I just want to congratulate all 6 of our finalists who did an exceptional job and really genuinely did make it very hard for us in the deliberation room. I also want to say that young people don't get a lot of opportunities to have their say and to have their voices heard, and so to be a part of this competition each year that celebrates and prioritises young people and your ideas is exceptional, and to hear your thoughts on the future is a really astonishing thing to be a part of. So thank you all, and you all did an extraordinary job on that. All right, the 2 students going into our very stressful, I'm very sorry, tiebreaker are Wesley Chen from Caulfield Grammar School and Corbin Afanasayev from Nossal High School. So we're heading into it. Corbin, Wesley, I'll invite you to stand up and line up as you would for the impromptus, and congratulations to everybody who took part in today.
All right, so in the meantime, I guess we'll go for another break, and Brandi, you can come up to the stage. Okay, so the impromptu topic for today, the second impromptu topic, is words can change worlds. So definitely on the nose. I'm excited to see what they come up with. Please welcome back Corbin Afanasyev.
Our society is the most isolated it has ever been. With the deterioration of third spaces, the sprawl of suburbia, and even car-centric infrastructure, which has minimized interactions as simple as seeing someone on the train every morning, the social alienation is getting worse. And it denotes the withering of communities. Be honest, how many of you are really friends with your neighbors? You just live next to them. These denotes the deterioration of both cultural, linguistic, and even hobby and interest-based communities, moving away from the interpersonal connection which makes them work. Words can change the world, for better or for worse. And that doesn't just mean on a large scale for something like this, a public speaking competition where I can go off about a social issue which affects me personally. Your words can change someone else's world. So make sure to strike up a conversation with that old friend you haven't heard from in a while. Or maybe say hi to a stranger that seems a bit lonely. Your words can change their world, and make sure that change is for the better, to mediate the isolation that our communities have started facing. Thank you.
Now, please welcome back Wesley Chen.
Amongst the Australian Amongst the Australian values are compassion, respect, and a fair go for all Australians. These are the pillars which form the fabric of Australian society and of our democracy. But is our society truly fair? Does everyone have a chance to voice their opinions? Does everyone have the chance to speak? And does everyone's words have the possibility to change the world? In our age of social media, with accelerated communication, what once would have took you weeks, maybe months, to send a message across the world would now take you merely 2 seconds. However, through this accelerated communication, we have come to highlight some key flaws of our society. Political correctness. Nowadays, people's actions and words are amplified through social media. And this, whilst it does have benefits in allowing everyone the chance to speak, it also creates a sense of caution, a sense of uncertainty. Will my next tweet be cancelled? Would my next post on Instagram be taken down? These are questions which young people have come to face. Our society needs to change its attitudes towards public discourse. Everyone needs to have the forum to speak up comfortably and the forum to voice their opinions without fear of being cancelled. Because everyone's words are important and everyone needs the chance to voice them. How do we create a culture of inclusion? Through exclusion, through rejecting the opinions that we do not tolerate. How is it possible for us to create a fair go for everyone to voice their words if everyone is afraid that their words might not conform to mainstream moral values? It just does not make sense. It doesn't make sense that our Australian Parliament has a median age of 51. It doesn't make sense that 6.6% of Australian Parliament is made up of members of Parliament who are born from an overseas non-European country, when 30% of Australia is of non-European descent. Is our democracy representative? Is our forums for debate representatives of everyone's words? Clearly, we need to change our attitudes towards discussion. Our society strives for inclusion, yet we are far from it. We need to listen to everyone's words, because perhaps that person that you don't disagree with, their words could change the world.
Thank you to Wesley. Our adjudicators, I believe, will now leave to deliberate again. We'll have another short break, and I'd like to invite Rani back up to the stage to play for us for our final break of the morning. Okay, so I would like to invite Beck, Travis and Tierney back up to the stage, and this time I would also like to invite Acting VCAA Chair Rob Fearnside to present the trophies.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all bearing with us, and thank you to Corbin and Wesley for being such great sports. I recognise that that was additionally stressful in addition to what an impromptu speech normally is, so you did an amazing job and we appreciate it. I won't beat around the bush any longer, so our runner-up for today is Corbin Afanasayev. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Corbin. There you are. There's the prize.
And as you all probably realise, that means that Wesley Chen is our winner for the day. Thanks very much. Congratulations, Wesley.
Congratulations, Wesley. You're going to have to thank your grandfather for his inspiration, I think. Oh, and there was the perpetual trophy as well.
Thank you all for coming and providing all of these young speakers with your support for their voices and their speeches. I'd like to congratulate not only Corbin and Wesley, but all of the speakers who spoke today and did such an exceptional job and who really showed such good sportsmanship with the unexpected twist at the end. Oh, me? Okay, right. I was just... Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, everyone.
For the next year. Congratulations.
Okay, so yeah, that was a great competition. Thank you to all of our outstanding presentations. There are a couple more people I would like to thank just before we wrap up, but I'll be quick. Rani, thank you so much for your beautiful performance today. Your talent added so much to this event. I would also like to thank the Wheeler Centre for their commitment to this competition this year. And thank you once again to Beck, Travis and Tierney for adjudicating this final. And a big thanks to all of you, the parents, friends, teachers, for coming along, and those who are on the live stream today as well. So that concludes this year's PISA State Final. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.